And I'm live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Everybody, anybody, it's 11 o'clock in the night. So, you know yourself. Yeah, I struggled to get around to these any earlier, but I see some of you there. How's it going? So, you know, yeah, it's hard to get into these things earlier in the night, and I just still want to do it. So, anyway, tonight I want to talk about some of the stuff in. I know I'm lip smacking here. Sorry, that's whiskey. I want to talk about some of the headlines and sort of public moments in the recent past in Ireland that have indicated a sort of an extreme malaise and almost like a singularity in Ireland with some of the stuff I usually talk about: housing, immigration, all of that. Some of the scandalous issues of the moment, how it's sort of getting to a point where it's very obvious that the political class don't really care about it. We'll watch a video in a second, and some headlines and stats that have come out lately. I'll give you the story. And the young people in Ireland are giving up on buying houses. Tourism is collapsing, and the government sources within the government are talking about infrastructure collapsing so that they kind of can't build houses, and new builds aren't happening. Demand is through the roof. Like it's sort of the wheels flying off the car. It's almost long past that point. And as I put in my title, they keep kind of just talking about how the economy is great, as if that's some excuse or even a real thing. And there have been a few little videos and kind of sound bites lately from politicians too that sort of, to me, hint a growing level of malaise, even among them, for their own bullshit. The one I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with is Simon Harris. Is he tarnished or a Taoiseach now? Don't know, don't care. One of those. I think he's tarnished, whatever. He was asked by Ben Scallon today about something, follow-up question. I'll just watch it in a minute with you. And it piqued my interest because the subject matter itself, it's about a foreign rapist who was let through our redundant, not working vetting system and the rest of it, and foreigners and unvetted. Yeah, so we kind of know that. But what got my interest was how much he didn't care. It's almost like, to me, it's like you are a habitual offender on not having your homework done in school, let's say, right? And you always have an excuse. My dog ate my homework. I had to go to the hospital. I broke my wrist or whatever. Who knows? I couldn't do it for this and that reason. And then one day the teacher asks you, and you just sort of are so over it and so jaded and so uninspired by your own bullshit anymore that you just kind of say, I just didn't do it because I just couldn't be bothered, to be honest, and you just give up on it. It struck me as something like that. And I don't know, I feel like there's more and more of that kind of happening. And I suppose what I'm getting at in a way is that the room for bullshit and the room for excuses is narrowing, even among the professional lying class, basically. The room for denial is narrowing. The indicators put out by the state's own media, basically, and by their own um, analytical organizations, the stats are so kind of damning on key issues, which I'll get into. And by the way, this won't be a long stream, 2 or 3 headlines, 1 or 2 videos. I'll just wrap it up. But the indicators on the bad side, let's say. So the argument, basically, traditionally, when you're speaking to a government or a state advocate, and a state advocate could be anyone from a paid anonymous internet user, and there are definitely many. Every time I put out a tweet that strikes a chord with people, which is something I've been doing lately. I know I'm tangenting with a tangent here, but it'll make sense. Every time I put out a tweet that touches a nerve with people, and what I've been doing is trying to tweet, not avoiding immigration stuff. I'll include it a little bit, but I'm broadening it to be a social critique overall about money, about finances, about quality of life, about public safety, this, that, and the other, access to services. And I'll keep the immigration thing in there a bit, but I won't focus it all on that. And I get these, just for what it's worth. You can't see people's likes anymore, but I can see them, and I'm getting a far broader set of likes from different types of people. It could even be they thems. It could be Laura Gurlo working in the office, whatever, a mix, and then the usual crowd, like a holistic set of feedback, and like is basically an endorsement of the message, right? And I find that kind of interesting. But when I put out one of those tweets that, if I may say so, an incisive critique, broad critique of the system, I like to make it sort of the type you don't hear on the TV so much. Maybe some of the right wing don't focus on it enough. It's a bit spicy, so that it's kind of containing a message that left wingers, it's a sort of a holistic critique without political baggage, I suppose, just reality analysis. And when I kind of get finger on the pulse and I get big feedback, relatively big numbers and interaction, without fail, I will get the same set of anonymous accounts coming in, and they sound like Ronan Lyons, or I'm pulling names out of a hat, some random sort of, espouser of regime discourse, basically, people who just toe the line on the key issues or whatever, right? They sound like high-end civil service types or something. I can feel that language from them. They're not random anon shit posters, lefties or whatever. They are intelligent technocrats, whoever they are, and they're always there without fail, sort of trying to poke holes in my. So there's the state argument for why everything is great and for the best. Then there's my counter argument, and they come in with the counter argument to poke holes in my counter argument, and to sort of elevate the positives and diminish the negatives, that kind of stuff, right? So you have that narrative going on where it's the state, and so the state, whether it's some guy on the TV from Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, whether it's some technocrat, or whether it's some technocrat with a hood on in my replies, right, on anonymously online, whatever, any of those state defenders, or you could even include like a wealthy boomer, who just kind of is wedded to it as well. And those types, their idea is to always say, yeah, you're obviously putting your finger on some negatives. Sure, we have a bit of an issue with housing. We need to sort it out. Sure, there's this, that, and the other. But for the most part, most of those negative things are themselves essential to the overall holistic functioning of the state, the society. And the overall holistic functioning of the society is more important, or fulfills a more overall positive role than the negatives do, right? The negative externalities are speed bumps, issues that need to be sorted out. But if you were to just rip them out entirely, mass immigration, liberalism, or so liberal democracy, whatever you call it, if you were to rip those things out, free market capitalism in a sense, the big one is multinationalism, multinational corporations, all these kind of pillars. If you were to rip them out, the negatives of doing that, or of kind of undermining them a little bit, would be worse than the negatives that I'm pointing out. Mass immigration, crime, whatever it happens to be. So that's the kind of dialectic, whatever. That's what it is. That's what the argument tends to be. And I just feel like we're getting to a point where, even in the framework of these people who like to say that everything's all for the best despite some of the negatives, even within their framework, the negatives, and so their framework, not mine, in their framework, the negatives are getting so large that it's sort of bankrupt to try and end the broader system. It's like, how can you hand wave away these minor problems? They're not minor problems. They're deep, systemic, extremely how would I put it? Like they aren't just some negative indicators. They are key indicators of a society that is in complete failure. Um, crime's up 1%. Oh well, we'll deal with it. It's like no, these are core issues, and I'll get to them. Maybe I'm going on a bit much, but and like I say, you see it in them. So I'll just start. Now I'm sharing. This is Ben Scallon, but I've just recently been thinking he's doing great stuff. There's always been, and I've been one of them at times, gripped critics and this and that. And there was a time when I would say, well, people are just you're only going to be given a mic to grill politicians if you're, sort of, if there's an understanding there of complicity or something like that. I didn't have that accusation towards anyone in particular. Ben, Fatima, these people from Gript, I've always liked them. Most of the writers and stuff, but just I've had sort of slight misgivings at times, and I'd be skeptical of just some of that scene or whatever sometimes, or I formerly was, and when other people were more skeptical than me, I could understand where they're coming from. Let's put it that way. But lately, just looking at the consistency of Ben Scallon's work, and regardless of your conspiratorial inclinations, the quality of his questioning of these politicians, I don't know. I just can't fault it. I can't, no matter how scaldy I would want to be about or conspiratorial or anyone else would want to be. It's just great questioning of the politicians. To be honest, anything more radical or more combustible would be kind of disreputable. It wouldn't look good. It's just getting right in there the right way. And, as I've been saying in a few streams lately, you have to credit people who show up every day and kind of do the work. So I just feel like it's important to note that. And as I mentioned it, just to say that I usually don't, when someone makes good content, anybody, I wouldn't like try to rob it too much or whatever. And I know they're official publication, but, I'm just going to take the liberty here on this one. It wasn't my work to do this. So, it's kind of, am I kind of stealing it or whatever? I don't know. Anyway. So, yeah, this was the interaction, right?
Thomas, a couple of weeks ago, I asked you about the case of Randy Gladstone, who...
So, I mean, it'll be self-explained, but he asked him previously, this was such a good... This is why I'm singing praises here, is because this was... Someone asked me, am I reading comments? Should I be reading comments? I don't know. People are talking about Ezra Levant and Justin Barrett. I'm just no comment. I'll just leave that. Maybe that'd be more entertaining, would it? Maybe I should do that. But back to Simon Harris. Just this was such a good line of questioning and approach, is to take something he asked about that Simon Harris had no defense for and didn't really give a shit about a few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, and just ask him again, because he originally gave the usual, well, I'll have to follow up with that, and I'll have to look into the specifics and get the details. And you just come back 4 weeks later and be like, well, and we're talking about a girl who was raped, an 18-year-old girl. The case couldn't be any more flagrant. And it was a perfect move, a perfect checkmate. Well, I've got you now, because you can't say, I'll look into it or whatever. You had your 4 weeks, right? I mean, I asked you, and here we are. Perfection, right? So let's just have a look.
Was a convicted rapist from Guyana with 18 previous convictions in the UK, who then came to Ireland and committed rape here on an 18-year-old girl. He was convicted of that, including for false imprisonment and so on. And you said you weren't across the details of the case at the time, so you couldn't comment on it.
Yeah, I'm not across the details, Ben. I don't want to mislead you.
I'm wondering if the intervening weeks, have you figured out an explanation as to why that case happened, given the systems that are currently in place that we hear so much about as far as vetting and so on?
Well, really, it's a matter for our immigration system and those who enforce that to speak to that. But I am concerned about Ben.
So apologies,
The interjections are great. I'm a connoisseur, okay? I enjoy these things more almost than the subject matter itself. You don't want to jump in. You don't want to be overly aggressive and interrupting, but that's perfect. Every time he tries to weasel, good word for him, out of it, he gets dragged back.
speak to that. But I am concerned about Ben.
So apologies, Taoiseach. I mean, as very senior member of the government, are you not part of the legal framework and the system that we have to prevent things like this from happening? Is that not part of your responsibility?
Of course I am, and that's why today at Cabinet, and it's important your viewers know this and your readers know this too. That's why today at Cabinet we're bringing forward proposals to improve the immigration system in Ireland, to make it more robust, to make it more firm, to make sure that the systems work and work better. That's our overriding objective here in relation to.
So as I can't remember where Ben goes next with this, but as of right now, he is actually maybe doing a good job. Professional weasel, right? So just the system overall, we're doing this and that. If you were more naive as a questioner, you could sort of get bamboozled by that and think, oh fuck, he didn't answer my question, but I can't even work out in what way he's not answering my question. I'm kind of befuddled. No, he doesn't get out of it.
To making sure we have an immigration system that is fit for purpose in relation to individual cases and how they work, how they're administered before the courts, how our Gardaí interact in relation to them. That is a matter for those authorities.
But I'm sorry.
I don't have any further knowledge in relation to that case.
It's nothing to do with the legal case that came afterwards. The question is about how an individual who had very serious convictions on their record in our neighbouring jurisdiction was allowed to enter the country, why that wasn't flagged, or if it was flagged, why he was allowed to enter the state anyway. Again, I'm just asking for clarification. Do you know how that happened, why that happened? Was it a failure of the existing system? Was it that there isn't a system in place to catch things like that? Do you know what happened or how this transpired?
You can see his little brain. He's like, I'll tell you, I once brought my cat, right, back in the day, to I was going away or whatever, and I brought my cat to this cat place where you take a pet holding facility, whatever it is, like camp, babysitting camp where you put them, and I put him in there, and it was a horrible place full of all these metal cages, like mazes, like a maze of metal cages where they would put the pets in and run around. I felt bad leaving him when I showed up. It wasn't a nice place. But anyway, I had to go. I left him in there, and it was this thing. And I never forget, he was kind of scared. And within about 10 seconds, he explored every possible permutation of that maze, ran around frantically, bam, 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 exit, exit, trying to figure his way out. That's how I see. Just a little story for you there. You can see his eyes darting around. He's exploring every little direction, and he's hitting that same brick wall at each end, thinking, fuck, I can't really say anything to this, can I? He's recognizing the checkmate and the checkmate as it's happening, and it's sort of dawning on him. I like that.
Isn't a system in place to catch things like that? Do you know what happened or how this transpired?
So my position in relation to this is very clear. I mean, if people have such issues, they should, of course, be flagged. The system should, of course, detect them, and it should be a cause of concern that didn't happen. Should that not have happened, I don't have all of the access to all of the information.
But and again, I really want to obviously give you a chance to respond. But I have to ask. I mean, it's been weeks since I brought this up to you. Is it not something that you would have looked into as far as a critical systems failure? It appears in our immigration system, the way it works. This is clearly an issue that's of huge concern to many, hundreds of thousands of people across this country who saw massive protests in Dublin over the weekend with people raising concerns about issues like this. Is this not something that you should be across the details of now, weeks later after it was brought up to you?
Well, I think it's important that I say to those people, firstly, I think when people protest and express their views in a democracy, I think they should always be heard. And I do think people have made it very clear that in Ireland, the overwhelming majority of people believe migration to be a good thing, but they want to know that the systems work. And I accept that when people raise cases where there is significant public concern in relation to that, that does nourish the need for further answers and further information. I don't have that information today, being quite honest. I am of the view that we need to have a firmer migration system. I am aware that we do fingerprint and run screening when people come into this country. It is important that people know that. And if on this occasion there was an issue that didn't work, of course, there's a need for further explanation in relation to it. Okay, folks, thanks very much. Thank you.
So basically, I didn't look into it. I don't give a shit. And that's it. Like, for years, back when the demonstrations in Ireland were at their sort of most intense. The standoffs with the Gardaí, Newtown, Mount Kennedy, Coolock, all that. One of the big things that I'm so distracted by the cat commentary here. Even as I was listening to Simon Harris, I was going to have more to reply to that and react, and I just got sucked in by the chat talking about cats. Never mind. You know, when that was going on, one of the things communities would cling to, because it was ordinary people getting together in their communities, not political radicals or whatever, they were afraid of the Eye of Sauron, so they would cling to unvetted males, right, as their big thing. And so the government sort of tried to react to that, to say that that was all a myth, that was total hysteria, moral panic, and actually they're fingerprinted, and the facts would come out and just say, no, that's not true. I mean, they might be fingerprinted, but like if you fingerprint someone coming in and you don't have a previous match for them, I mean, I've gone over this before, but if they weren't fingerprinted in like the wilds of Malawi or whatever, so, you know, and the system doesn't actually, it's not some like comprehensive thing, right? Insofar as people don't have documents and don't have history or whatever, it's not, basically there isn't a full record of them. It's just, if they have no record, they are sort of put on record from there on. But, you know, it's like, well, okay, we don't know who the person is. Like, we might have their fingerprint now, and I'm not even sure how true that is. You know, it's bullshit. And it came out more and more and more that it's bullshit. And after lying for so long, then there was this Randy Gladstone, or whatever his name is, the Guyanese guy, who had like, you know, it was like something I made up, you know, as a person trying to advocate my position. I make up a picture perfect, if, you know, in a weird, horrible way, case of a guy comes in, he was in England, he had been there, the neighboring jurisdiction, and he had multiple convictions for rape, and he strolled on in, no bother. You know, that's basically the status quo. Like what he did, that guy getting in is the status quo. Like more like him could get in, have gotten in. It's exactly true. And they just haven't reconciled with that at all. And basically they're at the point where, like, as Simon Harris basically says here, yeah, I don't know. That's for the immigration system, not my problem. So when you know, when you're protesting this in your community, it's like, okay, so we're at the point where if women in your life are attacked or put in danger, anyone is put in danger, they're basically at the point of just saying, yeah, we don't really care enough to even not only do anything about it, but to even look into it. That's what kind of gets me, I think, is that it's not even that I'm defending it or whatever, or that I'm lying about it. It's just I'm saying I don't even know, and I'm not going to know. So we're not even saying you're lying anymore. This is from Simon Harris's point of view. We're not even saying you're lying anymore. We're just saying that we just don't care. I don't know, like, you might be lying. Maybe you're right. Maybe these people are getting in. I don't even know. Okay, could you make yourself know? Or could you engage in it? Not really, to be honest. I don't know. That's the level we're kind of at, and that's how bankrupt they are. So I wanted to watch this one as well. It's Cathal Malone, right? Immigration lawyer, frequent guest in the media to like defend these kind of lies, right? Now I haven't watched it. Admittedly I didn't actually watch it because I've heard him before. He here debunks the myth and misconceptions around people seeking asylum, that people come in without documents and blah blah blah. For all I know, he is so right on the money that I'm going to be caught rotten here, bamboozled.
If you are a woman fleeing the
I'm just interested, to be honest. So I don't have a big own because I haven't watched it. So I haven't prepared the stats and the facts and whatever. I'm just taking this for what it is. You know, live react type of thing. Let's just see what it is. Like the fact that these people are coming on, and I don't want to use the word someone in specific is lying. I want to keep it all above board here. I mean, you know, for legal reasons and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, let's just take it for what it is. As I put up here on earlier, Marlborough representative debunks claims that cigarettes cause lung cancer. This person is an immigration lawyer, obviously makes money off of defending these spoofer migrants and stuff like that. So anyway, It's just the fact that he's even on the media, being given an uncontested platform repeatedly. This isn't his first time. This head has been on multiple times. I think there's others, maybe Wendy Lyons, perhaps. A few of these repeat offenders. He's the biggest one of all, I think. A man in glasses, acting sort of snooty and credentialed and professional, waving a magic wand in spite of the facts of the matter. But it's just the assumptions as well about international law and stuff like that that I find, you know, this kind of thing where even if they're, to the extent that they're technically correct, they're like, well, these things have to happen because we have a commitment, unbreakable, undebatable commitment to this, that, and the other. That's what always gets me as well. It's like, well, where's that written in stone? I mean, like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We should do different. It sort of, it begs the question of like, what are we doing here? Like this democracy. Like if I vote for any government and we have some sort of ironclad obligations that came from nowhere democratically, then what are we even doing here? But these people, these sort of in-house NGO consultant solicitor type people, it's the lofty attitude they have towards the people and just towards common sense and stuff like that, as if their sort of CSPE class overrides just like the majority will of the people, overall justice and the rest of it. But anyway, so let's just have a listen, see what he says.
If you are a woman fleeing the Taliban in Afghanistan, you literally...
Oh yeah, by the way, straight away. I'm for taking no asylum seekers, right? Full stop. I don't have any problem with that, right? Zero. My position is withdraw from the 1951 convention and all the subsequent shite, and don't take them. Singapore is not party to any of that. It's a globalized economy, sophisticated, seen as one of the world's leading bastions of international finance and trade, all that stuff. No one internationally, there's no condemnation, there's no NATO missiles, there's none of this condemning. Nobody's complaining about Singapore doing that, right? They argue that they're a small city state and they don't have territory and resources and all that. Well, Ireland clearly doesn't have the resources, or at least can't get it together. So it's the same story. We're also a, on paper, wealthy, small state or whatever. So that's Singapore. But then funnily enough, China is party to the 1951 convention, and they also basically don't take any asylum seekers. So it's like, Singapore isn't a member. They can do what they want. China is a member, but they don't actually follow it at all. They get to do what they want. By which I mean nobody complains about it. Their economy isn't going to be tanked and sanctioned, or whatever criticisms are made of Ireland that supposedly we're handcuffed. So I feel like that's all bullshit. But regardless, the other thing they talk about is there's a woman in Afghanistan, grenades blowing up all around her. Hungry, wolves are chasing them. They're being hunted. They're political dissidents. They're Solzhenitsyn, and they wrote a epic book criticizing the regime. They burned Qurans, whatever. It's like, look, you can say that if you want, but we all have seen the crowds of lads outside the asylum centers, all right? This is not Solzhenitsyn. This is not Three Kings, or if you've seen that movie, refugees running for the barbed wire fence and need to be saved, like in some dramatic context like that. It's bullshit. It is just economic migration. I'm speaking 99.9% of cases or whatever. Like this mythical running from the gunfire refugee sort of thing. That's not the case, right? We've seen the asylums. It's just young men, for the most part, from like Nigeria and Algeria and all this kind of stuff. Even Afghanistan, basically any country, take Ukraine, take anywhere. Just like with the conflict in the north of Ireland back in the day, people didn't go seeking asylum in Japan. You just moved to Cork or whatever. In almost every case, in terms of conflict, in terms of the narrative of bullets flying, barbed wire, whippings, political prisoners, that's almost never the case. People usually within their territory can kind of flee around and move away from it or whatever. And also, regardless, even if they have to seek some protection internationally, they could just go to their neighboring country for a few years If it's the Middle East, another Muslim-speaking country. That, I mean, am I going on here a bit? But like, you know, put it this way: if there was like a tsunami in the Netherlands, I would be okay with Ireland taking 1,000 of them, and the agreement, because they're in the Netherlands and they're economically at parity with us and culturally and all that kind of stuff. Because of that, I'd be like, yeah, we'll take that 1,000, and maybe a few will fall in love with the country and stay, but like most of them will just want to go home, you know. As soon as the levies are built back up and they have their stuff back together, they'll be going home. They'll be itching to get back home. And so it's sort of like there's parity there, and it makes sense. And you know, certainly if it was England or anywhere in Europe, really, they probably speak English, similar cultural values, all that. They would just go home, you know, want to go home. Same with, you know, Myanmar should go to Vietnam and should go to China or whatever. It kind of makes sense. Like the whole premise of the 1951 bullshit doesn't make sense anyway. It's basically destructive and shouldn't be happening. And the myth of the Hollywood asylum seeker is a lie too. Most evidenced by what we see with our eyes. And that's the thing that these people want you to not believe.
They cannot get issued a passport because they will not give a woman a passport to leave the country. If you're in Somalia, it doesn't have a functioning government. It's often impossible to get a proper passport. And even if you're from a country...
The question remains, how do they get on a plane to Ireland? Barring some sort of Cessna through the Congolese rainforest or whatever, you can't get on a proper international flight without a passport. You can't do it. If I show up, whether I'm in Uganda or Iceland, right? If I show up to an airport and say, hi, I'm here to get on the flight, where's your passport? And I go, can I give you these sunglasses instead? They'll say, you can't get on the plane. You have to show your passport. Like, you know what I mean? You have to. So you have to have a passport getting on the plane. Anyway.
Where you can get a passport, there's no such thing in Europe as an asylum visa. So if you are fleeing an awful situation,
and we all know it's just like rackets, like that's documented in mainstream media that people launder different identities and all sorts of stuff, and it's feeding into the industries we have here. The asylum centres being used, the one in Macroom and Cork known as the Park and Ride, right? Because it's effectively like a brothel. They're being used for mushroom meat factories, trawlers, and that's for the labor. The rest of them then are just dependents. And when you have like such a high proportion of them coming out with false or no documentation, of course they're not all coming from. Even if I grant his premise on Somalia and Afghanistan and Somalia don't account, or Eritrea, I think he likes that one as well. They are a relatively small number compared to the overall number of false or no documents coming in. So are you going to apply that to all the countries as an excuse, or is it just to Eritrea, Somalia, and Afghanistan?
The situation back home, you literally cannot have the correct documents when you arrive here. The minister has been talking.
Also, just like Qatar, they don't really take asylum refugees either. But like, what business, just at a common sense level, regardless of the technicalities of Somalia or any of that, what business do they have going to a small island on the northwest of Europe? It's just it's economic migration, obviously. It would make no sense to flee. If I were seeking asylum, oh no, there's bombs coming down, I have to escape, the government are cruel and all that. Here's what I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to Papua New Guinea for asylum. No, you go to your neighboring country, somewhere that speaks your same language, somewhere close by, familiar. You'll be happy with that. You just go to a place where you can get lots of free stuff. That's far away. That's totally alien. That's why that.
Big talk recently about how he is making
anyway. I'll let him talk.
What he would call improvements to the process and how he's going to speed everything up. He's got very little to do with it. I mean, these are consequential amendments that we have to make in order to bring us in line with what all of Europe is going to be doing from June 2026. In terms of the content of that, obviously, I mean, Nick there mentioned what's called the border procedure. So essentially, there are two main tracks down which they're going to send asylum seekers under this new pact. The standard procedure, which definitely shouldn't be called that, because almost nobody's going to be sent down it, or the border procedure. So certain categories of people don't get sent down the standard track. If you're from a safe country, so-called by the department, if you're from a country...
So-called. He won't grant that it's a safe country. Won't even grant that. Because, of course, like the real premise behind all this is that everyone and anyone pretty much should have unfettered access to asylum, which effectively provides a UBI, a sort of a super UBI system, like you free accommodation, free everything. And bear in mind, if I decided I wanted to go on the dole now, I can't, because I'm locked into a normal life, right? It's sort of saying, no, you've got too much income, you've got a house, this, that, and the other. Well, if you come in and you're gaming the system from day one with the help of certain people, and all your buddies, all your Algerian buddies, you'd have no shame, no bother, like no compunction about it at all. And then you have a team of lawyers and NGOs who are on board with you, as by design, to provide every bit of information and access and the script and all that to you. Well, it's very easy for you to arrive in as a so-called asylum seeker, hang out for a year in the hotel until you get given the house, right? You get I was even strategizing a few days ago just for the crack, what I would do if I were in that position. I was calculating the cost of, because I wasn't familiar up until now, how you can, the best game to play with a council house. Do you buy it straight away? Do you wait a while and then buy it? Do you never buy it at all? Is that better off? And I was thinking, how handy is it? You come in, you hang out in the hotel for like a year. This seems to be what they're doing anyway, based on like anecdotal reports and other like actual factual reports. That if you're hanging out there for a year, you don't have the baggage for applying for social housing and welfare to get out of asylum and into the kind of the real goodies. You don't have the baggage of a job, a house, a life, to kind of get out of where the state holds it against you and says you can't have it or puts you on a 10-year shit list or whatever. You say, well, I'm totally dependent. I'm homeless effectively, bar the accommodation, the hotel accommodation from asylum. I'm effectively homeless or on track to be homeless. And then on top of that, as we've seen many of these interviews, street interviews with these Algerians, Afghanis, whatever, where they say, well, I come here now, I have six kids, one wife, maybe two, and they come and then we get house. And because they don't have the NGO immigration lawyer handler with them, and so they get into a casual conversation with like Mark Josh or one of these people, and they'll just and they're probably kind of dumb like some of these people, let's say, just as individuals, and they'll just kind of say it, and they're broken English, and also they're from a culture where they don't realize the like complexities of the lies you have to tell so much. They're not familiar with that. So and they're not familiar with that they're on camera, you know what I mean? They're admitting shit. But they'll say, yeah, I have 7 kids at home, and when they come, I get house. So what that tells me is that you're playing the game for a year, hanging out in the hotel, watching Tom and Jerry on the TV, going for a sauna or whatever. And then basically you get on track. The council kind of earmarks you for the house, and then the reason you get up the list so quickly and get the house within, I'm speculating somewhat because a lot of this is murky. We're not really given the information, but based on the like things I've said so far, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That it's well known that in Ireland, if you're a family with 7 kids, very rare among anyone in this country, you go straight to the top of the list because basically you're in the top 1 percentile or whatever. So you're to top of the list. Well, if you're one of these with 7 kids in wherever, it must be the case that you can actually game the list by mentioning your 7 kids. You can provide evidence of them. And then the system, because it's so silly, we'll say, cannot differentiate between an Irish person with 7 kids and them because we're all equal and all that, and asylum lawyers and the rest of it. And so the system, the social housing system, must then recognize them as, and I'm not sure the consecutiveness of it, right? But I imagine that's how it works. If you have 7 kids and you're on social housing, then you're straight to the top of the list, and you might not actually have to have the kids with you necessarily yet to get that status. Anyway, so you get your 7 kids, then you get your house. And of course, you're in a 3-4 bedroom A/B rated house. At that point, then you can, if you want to, if you want to, you can get a bit of a job on the side, job officially. They'll raise your rent a little bit, nowhere near mortgage repayments or rent, a little bit. So now you, unlike the Irish Muppets, all you had to do is just basically fly into the country with a small pit stop in Asylum, shoot directly into a house, 4 or 5 bedroom house, you and your kids. And we're meant to just not say anything about that. And if they're from a safe country, Cathal Malone calls it a so-called safe country.
Country which has a lower than 20% grant rate of asylum applications across Europe.
But see, this is all the nonsense. So many cases are granted, so many people are granted asylum, whatever the figure is, right? But there's all these caveats: leave to remain, this, that, and the other. There's BTOPs. There's like all these different terms. We know in reality that he's weaseling around some of the definitions here. At the end of the day, of all the people, everything from Ukrainian to Afghani to Georgian to Albanian, who's been living in London for the last 15 years and has a London accent, you name it, right? Depending on your definition, legitimate to totally illegitimate, abundantly illegitimate, no matter what. Take all these people who come into the country and actually apply for asylum. Put aside the weasel words, just how many of them stay? Regardless of what premise they stay on or whatever it is, how many of them stay, and how many of them in the meantime get asylum, and how many of them are fast-tracked in onto state dependency. This would just be the common sense, but of course, if you insert 40 different acronyms, you can maybe sound like you're bullshitting your way around it. 20% of them are granted. So in your mind, you're thinking, okay, so 10 people come in, 8 are kicked out promptly because they're not legitimate or something like that. So I don't see what everyone's worrying about here. That sounds sort of rational. That's not what actually happens.
And most importantly, if you show up without the correct documents in Ireland or in any country in Europe, in any of those cases, you're in the border procedure. And this is the 12 weeks to get a decision, possibility of detention. Essentially, a lot of your rights are stripped away. But what, I mean, your listeners have to remember is almost everybody.
Your rights. Now, just bear in mind, if I go to Singapore, China's big, bad, and scary. Singapore's modern and globalized and cool and suave and sophisticated. What happens? What are my rights if I show up to Singapore with no documentation? There was a case I covered on a stream a few months ago of a guy who was arrested committing some crime, right? He had, I think it was somewhere it was in Cork anyway. And he was brought to the Garda station, and they brought in the immigration lawyer and the translator and all the rest of it. And he was sitting there and they were saying, okay, you've committed crimes. Who are you? And he basically said, I don't know what you're talking about, just in general. And they said, who are you? What's your documentation? When did you come in here? What's going on? And he was like, I don't know who I am. I don't have a passport. I basically don't have an identity. I'm Mr. Magoo type of thing, right? And they had to sit there. And imagine that guard had to sit there. This guy's committed a crime, and sort of just, he's beholden to these immigration lawyers and these translators and these rights that your man has just spoken about here. These rights that a lot of your rights are stripped away. What right would I have if I show up to Singapore and they say, hey, where's your passport? You obviously had one when you got on the plane, or and I say, I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. But your immigration lawyers and all this stuff has you by the balls, so you have to just basically let me in. There would be no rights. Rights? Are you mad? In such a scenario,
everybody shows up without the correct documents, because you can't apply for a visa to come to Ireland to claim asylum.
It's a bit more than that now, isn't it?
A bit more than what?
Well, not having. I mean, there's people who turn up without their passport. They manage to get on the plane, and then they get to Dublin. And they don't have a passport. Like look, I'm pro-immigration. I think Ireland needs to do it absolutely needs.
Now, okay, so your man is playing the role of the opponent here. He's like in a measured way, sort of pushing back a little bit on the worst excesses of the bullshit coming out of this guy's mouth. But why isn't there, and there never is, why isn't there like a staunch anti-immigration, skeptical figure who's informed and given foreknowledge of the interview so they can prepare all their stuff to sit down and like engage with Cathal Malone on this. But anyway, Shane Coleman and his sort of meek pushback will have to do.
Needs to have its do its bit and share its responsibility. But it's very hard to make the argument when people say, there's lots of people turning up without the correct documents. And look, they're desperate people in many cases, but they know what they're doing when they don't have those documents.
Well, okay. If we put the challenge down, let me make the argument perhaps. If you are a woman fleeing the Taliban in Afghanistan, you literally cannot get issued a passport because they will not give a woman a passport to leave the country. If you're in Somalia, it doesn't have a functioning government. It's often impossible to get a proper passport. And even if you're from a country where you can get a passport, there's no such thing in Europe as an asylum visa. So if you are fleeing an awful situation back home, you literally cannot have the correct documents when you arrive here, unless you learn.
Look,
I'm actually trying to get my head around that. I might need to give that another go. I might, like a coffee, like a posh espresso or whatever in like a hipster cafe. You take a drink of it, it kind of tastes awful, and you're like, oh no, this is good coffee. I want to taste the flavors. My palate might be adjusted now. Just let me give it another go. Maybe I'll get something out of it. I'm having one of those now. Let's just whirl that one back again, if you don't mind.
If you're in Somalia, it doesn't have a functioning.
Okay, so if you're in Somalia or Afghanistan fleeing bullets or whatever it happens to be, you're a woman and the Taliban are after you or whatever, you can't get a passport because you're a woman. So you leave the country is on foot, or I'm not sure how that translates. I just don't know what he's going for there, right? How it translates to passport, no passport. I don't quite see that one.
Impossible to get a proper passport.
Oh, and by the way, that's a fringe. Even that is a fringe, a bit of a like a Mott and Bailey situation where, like, yeah, but what about all the others who aren't women in Afghanistan? Like that, but that would be that's not the lion's share of these document bullshitter people. But anyway,
passport. And even if you're from a country where you can get a passport, there's no such thing in Europe as an asylum visa.
So even if you can get a passport, you can't get an asylum visa. So you get on the plane with your passport and then you chuck it down the toilet or whatever it is. And then you show up with no passport and say, hey, I'm Mr. Nobody. Why wouldn't you, in the countries, let's say, where you can get a passport, just going by his premise here, I want to flee asylum. I'm from a country where you can get a passport. I'm from Algeria. I want to claim asylum in Ireland. I can get a passport, but I cannot get an asylum visa to go to Ireland because that's where I need to flee for asylum for some reason. So I can't apply. Why can't I, as an Algerian, just apply to go to? I don't know how travel visas work to Ireland in detail, but I'm sure in Algeria you can apply. I'm not really. There can't be that much to it. You're an Algerian. You go on, Skyscanner, or you just book a flight to Ireland like anyone does. Like I can book a flight to Algeria to go on holidays or whatever, and if it's for like a week, there's very minimal requirement. I assume, just like with most countries, barring Russia, you get into Russia, it's kind of hard, places like that. But like most countries, you can kind of just go there if you're just flying there for a meeting, for a business meeting, for holiday, whatever. So all you have to do is go on that premise and then touch base on Irish soil and then apply for asylum with the same passport you got on the plane with as the person you are. Why couldn't you just do that? Am I missing something there or no? The fact that they can't specifically go from their origin country on the basis of asylum, I don't quite get that.
So if you are fleeing an awful situation back home, you literally cannot have the correct documents when you arrive here, unless you learn.
Look, I don't want to be, I don't want to be making the argument for
Why don't you? Anyway,
the immigration, but I suppose the obvious counter argument to that is if you're coming from Somalia or the Taliban, you're not getting a direct flight to Dublin. You have come from somewhere else first.
Absolutely, but there's a misconception here that under the Dublin regulation that you're obliged to.
Okay, so now we're switching. Okay, so now we're switching over. So that was So actually, you don't have to apply on the first country you get to. Okay, but why does the passport get destroyed? How did the passport exist to begin with, and then somehow not exist in Dublin or Cork or wherever else?
Asylum in the first safe country you get to. That is simply not legally the case, number one. And number two, if we talk about, because as you just mentioned, Ireland doing its fair share, if you think about it, there's essentially not a direct flight to Ireland from any country which might produce refugees. So the logic of the argument, which I'm not saying you're making, but in fairness, you're putting forward the counter argument. The logic of that argument.
I need to take another sip of the coffee here.
But
I'm not saying you're making the argument. What argument exactly?
Which might produce refugees. So the logic of the argument, which I'm not saying you're making, but there's essentially not a direct flight to Ireland from any country which might produce refugees. So the logic of the argument, which I'm not saying you're making, but in fairness, you're putting forward the counter argument. The logic of that argument is that we should have no refugees in Ireland.
So he's basically
no Syrian, no.
So he's basically switched from a. Shane Coleman asked him a technical question of like, well, if they had enough of a passport to get from their country of origin to the destination in between country, how do they end up in Dublin with no passport? Like they did the first half of it. What happened to the second half? And now he's switching to, well, the Dublin regulation, people think that means so and so, but it actually, there's some amendments made to it, and technically it's this and that. That's a different argument. What about the one that was made to you?
Afghan, no Eritrean, no Sudanese person, etc., could get here directly, which would mean that countries that happened to have a direct link to a country that produces real refugees would have all of them, and we would have none of them, and that can't be fair either.
Okay, whether that's fair or not, though, what happened to the destroying of documents, which was, I believe, what he was meant to be debunking? Well, that didn't go great. There was part of me thinking, well, maybe he's got a bunch of mumbo jumbo and technicalities, and he's actually presenting not a good argument. It's bullshit, but like maybe it's a bit of a mind twister, and there's a few technicalities out there that kind of catch. I struggle to address or whatever. I was kind of putting myself on the line there a little bit because I hadn't watched this, but that was really bad. That was very bad. So anyway, this will be very quick. I'll just wind it up with a few of these headlines. It's kind of I went on a detour there, just rambling about, I suppose, the lies more. But originally I started with this premise about a very different premise, really, that the indicators are getting very bad. So when the regime debunker or whatever, which is thematic here, when they want to say that, well, we have such a good economy, our economy is so great, which I always love. I always online post the picture of the guy who did a mass shooting, crazy young fella in Florida, I believe, Parkland shooting, I think it was, when he was being interrogated, and it's that meme of I say, is the economy in the room with us now? Because when someone says the economy is doing great, I'm going, where is it? I mean, obviously that applies to a top 5, 10%, whatever percent of people. Some people, asset owners, this, that, and the other. Some people benefit from it, but that would be a minority. But for the majority of us, I'm getting my like Looney Tunes fishing net, and I'm going out onto the street and I'm waving around going, I can't find it. I can't grab it. Where is this economy? And you say, well, that's your failure or whatever. No, we're talking about broad statistics here of people, right? Objectively. For the majority of people, the economy, so-called, is nowhere to be found. And I love especially how they call it our economy. So on one hand, they want to say that it's so funny. Like on one hand, we're a great place to do business for every, like a bordello for every corrupt entity in the world, basically, to do what it wants with. Shadow banking, you name it, right? And then all the multinationals to do what they want with. Some of whom are good and bad, whatever. But it's an open house. There's no national economic protections, none of that. And then on the other hand, by numbers, by people, there is no such thing as Irish, right? Like anyone can be Irish. So if some Afghani comes here and like loves Barry's tea and someone hands him a piece of paper, he's just as Irish as you are. So there is no Irish person. And then also we're bringing in hundreds of thousands of people. So like it's all diluted out of existence anyway. So Ireland, there's no us in any meaningful sense. But suddenly they're talking about, when you try to critique the conditions, they say, well, what about our economy? and the key word being our. It's like, so about an economy that for the most majority of us objectively doesn't exist, right? This great economy. In fact, we're actively, like, the economy does you harm every day, right? Because of course high house prices inflates the economy. But if you're on the shit end of that stick, which most of us are, well, it's not really great. Like, the economy does great, but I don't do great, you know. But suddenly they come back to our economy. So suddenly it's our again, which is such a snaky little move, such a little rhetorical trick. Our economy, who's our Irish people? So are we our, or are we not our? Like, we're only our when you're getting totally effed. Suddenly then it's our economy, they say from their doggy veranda. But don't you love our economy? But yeah, so that's, anyway, that's they argue about the economy and all of that, and that the downsides are just a small few hiccups along the way. But here's one for you. So, and I'll be quick enough on this. Should I enlarge the screen or not? Is that better or worse? I don't know if anyone cares to feedback on that. But I'll just be quick on this. I feel like this was robbed from me, right? Because I feel like the best commentary in Ireland at the moment, like realistically, is coming from me. No, not quite, but somewhat, a little bit. But I'll pull names out of a hat: Keith Woods, Nick Delahanty. I'm not even putting myself in the category with this. These people are doing great work, but just like the likes of people like that, posters online, you various people, pushing narratives and discourse and new facts and information and all of that. And that's where the real stuff is. It's not to be found in, like, turn on the weekly politics discussion on RT. It's dead. It's boring. I think a lot of them are getting their ideas in a way from the online sphere, small online sphere of people who are making good commentary. Anyway, here's my conspiracy theory. I put up a post a few weeks ago saying that if I were advising a young person now, I would be reluctantly tempted to. I wouldn't necessarily give this advice, but I would be tempted to say, if you're 18 now and you're coming of age and you're planning to, your life is going to become your life, basically, I would be tempted to say to that person, don't try, don't get a job, don't do any of that. Just basically sit down with your monocle and study the social welfare and social housing situation, and you play it like a fiddle, right? You consult the best experts, I mean, people who have been running the game for decades. You consult all of them and you say, what should I do? Should we get married? Should we not get married? Should I stay at home? Should I work a little bit? Should I, play it like that. Leave your shame at the door. Never mind that, right? Because the system hates you. Just technically play the game to get on that social housing, to get all these medical cards or whatever, and then figure out exactly how much you can work on and off the books. I'm not giving illegal advice here. I'm just saying theoretically, someone else might say this, not me, would say, work under the table, work a bit on the table, whatever, just keep it all either hidden away or just under the thresholds and all that. And you will objectively be much better off than someone who earns a median salary and just tries, like, honest as hell. I'm going to work. I don't want to take anything from the state. I don't want to be like that or whatever. I'll just get a good mortgage and I'll save up and I'll do this and that and the other. Because you will get, sorry to say, you will get fucked, right? And my advice to that person was to say, unless you see yourself earning at least twice the median salary, which in a way, as general advice to a mass population, is sort of a what's the word? Paradox, or someone give me the word there. I can't think of it. It's it doesn't make sense, right? Because one individual might be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat and earn twice the median income. Sure, a go-getter, successful, bright, all that kind of stuff. But by definition, the majority of the population can't earn twice the median salary, or else it wouldn't be the median salary, would it? So unless you really fancy yourself as twice the average Joe, that's not twice the biggest bum in the country. That's twice the average guy, splitting the richest, the poorest, everyone in the middle, and sort of getting, a median. unless you soberly, realistically fancy yourself getting there, which if you do, and great, wonderful. But if you don't, or if you've sort of reasonable doubt, then you don't want to get caught in that middle space really at all, because it's completely unforgiving. And you might say, well, that's the squeeze middle. There's always been a squeeze middle. Yes, but what's happening now is that the squeeze middle is becoming huge. The squeeze middle, the person who was on 80 grand or a household 80 grand or whatever used to be above the squeeze middle. The squeeze middle was, I don't know the figures. The squeeze middle was like, well, if you've a household income above 37 grand, then you can't get the benefits, you can't get any help or whatever. So if you're on a household income of 38 grand, you're the squeeze middle, you're getting fucked. That was always the case. But the good aspect of that was that, yeah, but if you achieve a little bit of escape velocity there and you get to 60, 70 household income, something like that, ideally more, 80, somewhere there, right? Like a decent bit clear of your 37 grand threshold, then you'll be grand. You still might gripe about the social welfare guy down the road or whatever, but ultimately you'll sell yourself, well, I get to go on a holiday every year and I've got a decent car and I've got a decent house and all the stuff is sorted, really, right? You still have to save, you still have to be careful and all that, but like all the fundamentals are grand. It's just a question of whether your car is a couple of years older or newer, which hotel you pick on holiday, maybe you get the less good one, little things like that. But for the most part, all your fundamentals are very secure. And what's happening now is that the position that person who was on 37.5 grand, just above the threshold, realistically poor enough to need the help, but not actually able to access it. Now you could have the people who are on 80 grand household salary are at the point where if you were to actually look at the principles of the thresholds and the cost of living and the cost of mortgages and rent and all that stuff, well, they're where the 37.5 grand guy was before. But of course, they're nowhere near the thresholds. So they could basically die on the street, right? Die in their house, whatever. And the state, when they come in and say, hey, I'm fucked or whatever, the state will come in and say, not only are you above the limit, you're like 2.5 times above the limit. You're crazy, right? Get out of here. It doesn't matter what your conditions, circumstances are, none of it. And that's what's happening, is that's what the economy, the inflation, all the systemic features of the state and the economy, the society, that's what's happening, is that now you are at a point where, and this is debatable, but to use a round figure, you kind of need to be on 100 grand to be where the person who was on, and not too long ago, even like 10 years ago, the person who was on like 50, 60, somewhere there, like you need to be well clear of 100 grand now. And that's the thing. A lot of people aren't. Like I'd say most people aren't. You'd have to do the numbers, but like a huge amount, but they're well clear of any state supports. And so basically, long story short, the squeeze middle is now massive and you have to be proper, doing great, or quite well, we'll say, to actually get to the point where the benefits of social welfare, social housing, any of medical cards are not even in your mind. Like you're definitely comfortable enough that none of those things, your house, your life, your health, your whatever it happens to be, none of those things are even concerns at all. You can cover all those things and then you can have luxuries and then you can have a few more luxuries and you can make choices and you can save a bit and you're like a middle class, what we traditionally saw as like a sort of comfortable enough middle class person. You have to be, up out of 100 grand for that. And the problem is that the wages haven't done that. They've grown a bit, but nothing like that. So you're at a point where and the other thing is people don't get it either, because there's people who, let's say, took their mortgage out 12 years ago, a very good price they would have gotten for it and low interest rates, let's say, right? And they would say, well, I'm not on that much, I'm not on 100 plus grand, but I'm kind of doing all right. But it's like, yeah, but if you take your house that you bought in 2013, 14, if you take that same house now and you look at the price and you look at the mortgage on it and you look at the cost of repairing it and you look at the cost of buying a new car or a used car, and you look at the cost of all this kind of stuff, like, so there would be a bit of a chasm even between people who are only separated by like a micro generation, like a 10-year period or whatever. So when I'm talking about and this is relevant, kind of germane to what I'm speaking about, is that I'm specifically talking about people under, you name the age. Is it 35? Is it 40? Is it people in their 20s? I don't know, but basically skewing younger, right? This becomes more true, that there is this sort of singularity for people where, yeah, unless you're going to do really well. So like what I'm saying is, like, someone who's like 49 who had their mortgage like the last 10, 15 years, they might go, what's he saying? You need they have a house that they bought 12 years ago. That's in good nick or whatever, and they have mostly their essential assets gotten and whatever. They're going, I'm not on 100 grand and I'm not that bad or whatever. But it's like, you have to look at a 25-year-old. A 25-year-old who wants to get a house now will pay, fuck knows, right? Maybe twice as much for a house that's 40% worse. And then when they get their first car, if it's got under 200,000 kilometers on it, it's going to cost them God knows what or whatever, right? So they're in a different position even than someone who's like 15 years older than them, is what I'm saying. So you have this bifurcated economy, but it's generally declining. The squeeze middle thing is growing for everybody in general, but it's also age skewed, right, because of some of these things. And so, like, yeah, we all know boomers aren't aware of it or whatever, but also people my age, Gen X's, might not be as aware of it either, and if you're not on the market on Daft, if you're not looking, if you're not trying to get these things sorted out, you kind of sometimes don't know. So anyway, I was thinking about it. I've been studying the numbers and all that and looking around me and having my own lived experience as well, just joining the dots and realizing that I had this intuition that, yeah, that's what I would tell a young person now, because honestly, if you're not planning to be a bit of a hotshot, you haven't a hope. It's not that, oh, well, the hotshot will be rich and you won't be rich. It's like, no, you either go hotshot mode and get like what we call a good job, or, it's going to be fucking pretty brutal. Like, it could be precarious and dangerous for you. And that's what I meant, is that I wouldn't tell someone to go down that track if it was just a case of they wouldn't have enough holidays or something. I'd only tell someone to go down that track if they were put in danger by being put in this squeeze, like actual danger, precarity and all the rest of it. So it's like, no, you get your social house and then you get whatever job and then you pay a bit more on it and keep your medical card and play the game or whatever. You will objectively be, if you're in that social house and the house next to you is private, and it's battered, it's like 60 years old, right, and it's battered and whatever, that person will go in and pay 300,000-400,000 for it. I've seen semi-D ex-council houses in mediocre condition in Dublin going for like 600 grand, and plus, because some of them go above asking and all that, around the 600 grand territory. And then when you add on the interest, that house becomes like basically €1 million. And then on top of that, a lot of these houses, to varying extents, probably will need a bit of work. So if they need a bit of wiring and a bit of roof and a bit of whatever, instead of that being like it might have been in days gone by, oh, you need to pull a 15 grand out of the credit union or something like that. No, you're going to be getting told that's going to be 80, 90 grand for all that stuff. These are the conditions that your neighbor will be in that ex-council house, and you got into the one where you don't have to pay for any of it, basically, and you can still work a bit, and you definitely don't have to take responsibility for any of it. That argument, in my mind, was becoming clear to me. And then a week or two later, lo and behold, this article comes out from Charlie Weston, regime financial reporter type of thing, and says, young people ditching home ownership dream and applying for social housing instead, right? So, oh, fuck. Sorry for the language, lads, but this is not... I wanted to, because there's some stats in this that matter, actually. So I'll just run it through a little system here. Bear with. I'm just going to have to leave it at this. I can't keep talking, can I? I do this every time. I really looked at the subject matter and I thought there can't be that much in this, really. I can't. Am I just long-winded? Is that what it is? Ah, you bollocks. Okay, so it's not coming up for me there. Show business, you know. Well, how's everyone getting on? It's just loading. That's just not happening. Okay, if anyone wants to put, I'll put a challenge. If anybody wants to put an archive link for this, a functioning archive link in the chat for this. It's just 1 or 2 stats. It's not like the end of the world, but it's just, you know, I wanted to read it like. So in effect, I can come back to the stats if someone archives it. I read the article, right? It was something like maybe like 60% of people under the age of 24. It was skewed by age, you know. It was a lot of people in general, but at the lower age, people between like 18 and 24, it was a number like that, which I myself didn't even expect it. I that was my intuition about it, but I didn't think the world had actually copped onto it for itself, you know. That actually my insight, my intuition, actually all the young people, lo and behold, they're rational actors. They've picked up on these things too. The word is out, the understanding is out. People read the tea leaves, and rational actors will respond to incentives. And there is no incentive to basically the smartest move for the most people. The smartest objective move, even if you're like, I'm not a social welfare person. I wouldn't do this or that. That's not for me. I want to own my own stuff. I want to be independent. Yes, but like the conditions in front of you are telling you to do this, and that's what they're setting up. Some people say it's conspiracy or whatever, but that's where we're at, you know, where you have a country where under a certain age, and this is where like your average 49-year-old doesn't really grasp this, you know, because they don't know the conditions. That's the rational move most people are reading. I mean, that was never the way. You would never have 60% of people under 24 or whatever having that in their mind as their move, as their only move, basically. Because if I try, I'll either not be able to get a house, or I'll end up in like a shack that's falling apart in Leitrim or whatever. So it's just not happening. Like, it's just not going to happen. So yeah, I'm just going to go on the list. Someone says try that link. I can't see a link. I just wanted to have the stat right, because I think it is something along the lines of 60% thereabouts. I can't see a link yet. Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter so much. You can find that article for yourself and check the stat in specific. But I just think so. Just case number one, that is an indictment to which Pascal Donoghue or some regime defendant or whatever, or defender, defendant. What are you meant to say to that? Our economy is doing great, but 60% of people, young people, have just completely abandoned the premise of trying to get a house for themselves, and they're just going on social housing. That can't necessarily work for everyone, unless we completely reform into a total UBI system or something like that. But in which case, you better just be clear about it. Don't have people going out buying houses. So, but that's one. Second, and the key point of these, and I'll keep it shorter for this one. The key point of these is that, of course, a shitty computer system is freezing up now as well. The point of these stories is that not only are the facts suggesting that Ireland has a sort of fundamental problem, like fundamental, not in my view. I've thought there's a fundamental problem for years, but I was saying even under the premise of a Pascal Donoghue or a whoever, it's got problems that a great economy cannot make excuse, right? You can't say you have a great economy or overall things are great, but for a few speed bumps. These aren't speed bumps, right? But the other point is that it's not just that the facts are as such, it's that people recognize it. And I feel like that's important. And it's kind of thematic with Simon Harris. It's like he doesn't even care anymore as a sort of figurehead to bother defending it, like even faking an honest defense. And in terms of the indicators about the society, key indicators, things like home ownership, right? Those aren't exactly side points. It shows that it's not just that it's hard for young people to buy homes, it's that young people have fully internalized the fact that they will not own a home, and they are doing such a thing, all just deciding to go on the state list. Because they know. So it's not just that it's that everybody knows. And this is another good one for that. Tourism in the state, this is a story is a few weeks old. Tourism in a state of near collapse as visitors down 30%, spend down 30%. So in 1 year, tourism is down 30%. Now, my point about that was that, they're not, the tourists themselves spend a lot of money. Some of them might be rich, whatever, but they spend a lot of money. And if you're going on holidays, you are actually a very rational actor. You tease over which hotel you're going to go to, and before you do any of that, you tease over which country you're going to go to. You examine the price of stuff. Yeah, how much is it for a meal out? Which hotel can I get? What's there to do? What's the situation like in the country? Is it a good place to go? Let me find some people talking about the country. Let me find other tourists reviewing the place. You will do all that. Like, I mean, almost by definition, again, nobody sort of blindly goes on a holiday. You very keenly look into where you're going, which is the reason why you choose to go there or don't choose to go there. And so the tourism numbers are a bit of a vote, like an international sort of X factor on the country itself, because they are all such rational, informed actors, pretty much, because they're parting with their money. And the fact that it's down, it would be one thing if it was down 4% or something. I mean, that's relevant to the industry, relevant to whatever, but who cares? 30% in 1 year. That's sort of like, to me, my analogy for that was, if you found out that tourism numbers to China had gone down 30% in a year and you didn't know much about the place or anything about it, you would just almost assume there had been a natural disaster or some major political upheaval, some sort of political coup, revolution, street violence, something like that going on, some sort of instability, or that there was an earthquake like in Myanmar and Thailand, or something like that. Like, okay, I see why people aren't going there. I mean, that's what I would assume if I saw a number like that. That's a lot of people in 1 year. And we know the reasons are many. There's the price of things, sure. But again, that comes back to the fault of the state. I mean, it's not just the price of pints and all that. The biggest thing will be your hotel. If your hotel, for a mediocre hotel in like Swinford, I saw prices. I looked up a hotel in Swinford. It cost a fortune, off season and all that. You can't get anywhere in Ireland for less than several €100. And if you want somewhere good, somewhere decent, somewhere seasonal, like whatever it is in the summer, and like nice, you go. I don't just want to go to any like run of the mill. I want to go to a nice hotel. If you do, which is standard, I mean, it's a standard desire. You should be able to get something for, it's going to cost you a bit, but like affordable, reasonable. If you're looking at that hotel and it's costing near on €400 a night or something like that, you just can't do that. Like, I mean, you're obviously going to look to other countries and go, hey, I'm sure there's nice cliffs in Ireland. There's a bit of crack in the pub, whatever it supposedly has going for it. I mean, there's also a list of other countries that have nice things and nice cliffs. I mean, I think I'll just go to that if I can get it for like half the price in the same continent. I mean, I wouldn't in a million years come to Ireland as a tourist, I'll be honest. Under these conditions, then they see the Mick O'Keefe posting, all these kind of things, the articles coming out, Conor McGregor and all that. They see that Ireland, and this is the key thing, what Ireland had to offer, right? We love our cliffs of Moher, they're great. Connemara is beautiful. Morgoth did a beautiful article about it, and he's right. It's lovely. I love that whole area up to Lenan, up to Lewisburg and around to Achill and all that. I love it, right? Nice. But again, as patriotic as I am on that, if you go to Portugal, or you go to most countries, there's a beautiful scenic area, right? So that alone won't cut it. We never had our stew is nice and our few bits are nice and cozy and all that. We've good food, good produce, good butter and milk and cheese and meat and whatever. But it's not Italy, it's not France, it's not the seafood in Portugal and they have a better food culture. Let's be real. So what do we have to offer? What people came to Ireland for? Tourists would come to Ireland back in the day, even when Ireland was supposedly poor. They would come to Ireland for the cohesion, for the familiarity, for the stopping for directions. A guy gives you directions and he says, "Oh, where are you from?" and chats away to you and maybe invites you into the house for a cup of tea. And next thing you know, you're sort of invited along for a pint. And, you're just there's this sort of, like, regardless of how rich or poor, how good or bad the food is, how unique the views are or not. That's kind of, in my mind, in my vision of Ireland gone by, that's kind of what I'd be going for. You're a New Yorker, you live in this post-societal dystopia or whatever. The idea that I can go to Ireland and sort of get into their thing a bit, a society basically, for all its little warts and unemployment or this or that or various little problems at all stages. Every country has certain problems. The food isn't as good or whatever, but they want to be here for, or even Dublin back in the early Celtic Tiger. If you went out on a night in Dublin's not, I don't think it's that great a city, like even at the best of times. It's not magnificent. It hasn't got Parisian architecture. It hasn't got a tube like London does to get around and all of that. So it's kind of an awkward city, not that pretty and the rest. But to me, it's like, yeah, but you go out in Dublin and you could meet, someone gave an example of like the Dole heads in Galway. Bear with me. The Dole heads in Galway in like the late 90s and stuff. You'll hear Tommy Tiernan talking about, for years he was on the Dole while he was developing his comedy and just being a Dole head, arsing around drinking and stuff. And that actually probably helped him form his character, as part of it. But people like that who sort of were on the Dole. I grew up and there were still some around Cork. They're sort of on the Dole, but they live in town. They might do a few hours in a bar, but they're renting a flat. That's actually, it's all right. It's not too bad. It's not fancy, but it's grand. They're driving a little car. They go on the odd holiday. You might even go on a trip away to Edinburgh and this and that, and all their fundamentals they have. With like the Dole, you're figuring out how you're managing this, but they kind of do. They make it stretch. And they're like towny dwellers, they hang around. They're great crack. They're characters. And there was sort of a role for that. I think Tommy Tiernan talked about the importance of that. And you're not getting that anymore. You don't have that can't work anymore. And a good example for this is if you watch Bachelor's Walk, right? Make a note of this. Watch Bachelor's Walk season 1. It's an all right show, but it's young, aspiring kind of it's Dubliners who live in a flat together. One of them is like an unemployed waster. The other one is like working in a law firm. It's a mix, but they're all sort of, a pack of arses, really young, just going for loads of pints all the time when they can and getting into romances and the rest of it. And there's that kind of culture, like Irish people en masse, normal Irish people from around the country and from within the city could live in Dublin. And just, you went to Dublin, there were loads of people there, Dubliners, and then loads of other Irish people who'd flocked in. And there's a big bar culture and, stuff like that. If I'm a tourist, that's what I want to go for. I want to go into a pub and meet a bunch of Tommy Tiernans. That's what you want. If you're a young one, you come over and you're thinking it'll be your PS I love you. You're going to meet this sort of a happy-go-lucky, reveler, or whatever. That none of that's there anymore. Like I'm coming up with like analogies or like images, but none of that's there anymore. You're not finding that. It's people don't have freedom. They don't. There's no cohesiveness anymore. Certainly, if you go to Dublin, it's just all foreigners. And however you feel about that, it's like that's not Ireland. So now you don't. The food is like you have you can go. You're not coming to Ireland to get a Thai takeaway, and lots of foreigners and Irish people can't live in the centres anymore. They're all dispersed and sort of busy. And and then the country itself is just too expensive for you. There's the pitch, whatever it is, the selling point is gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. You still have some of the negative aspects that might have always existed, but the good side is just gone now as well. So there's basically no reason to come anymore. It's really expensive, and there is a lot of press about how bad it is with the migrant situation, Dublin being full of foreigners. And I do think when people hear that, they might have in mind that, well, yeah, we know France is kind of like that, Paris is like that, London's like that. But people have this thing about, not Ireland, like, not Ireland, peripheral, the quiet man, all of that, like, or even, the 80s and the 90s, those vibes, the thing with Colomini, the Dublin, whatever it's called, the commitments, whatever people would see in that isn't there, right? You're not getting that. And instead they just see, like, like an African naked running down O'Connell Street or whatever, and they know a cup of Starbucks is going to cost €6. There's just no argument anymore. And again, Paris has the migrant replacement as well, and all of the terrorist attacks and all this stuff. But Paris has the beautiful architecture that still stands for the most part. Notre Dame is back. The food is still good. You can, you're going to hear your French spoken, and you have that. Italy still has, they still have some of the fundamentals, whereas we never had those fundamentals. We just had us. That we were the selling point. Our society, our social fabric was the selling point. And also the prices, to be honest, because you could go out west and get a hotel for a reasonable price. And if you couldn't get that and you were willing to slum it in like a stodgy kind of Airbnb with doilies everywhere and all that, that'll definitely be cheap, right? Fairly cheap. 30, 40 euro a night, 50 euro a night max, that kind of thing. Now that's up on Airbnb, for God knows what. And so that's gone too. So you can't go and there's a nice little old lady running an Airbnb and it's actually very cheap. So now you can go to the west of Ireland for like 40 euro a night and just use your money to have a good time, rent a car, go all over the place with your buddies. And you don't have to be a 60-year-old American boomer in khakis to be able to afford it, like some rich guy. You can actually be an American 24-year-old who's not from a rich family. You just saved up a bit from your job, and now you're going on a 2-week fun holiday in Ireland. You're not affording that if you're that person now. You're just not. Irish people can't even afford to go on holidays in Ireland anymore. So that has all been, all those like multivariate aspects of the nation state or whatever kind of coming apart are evident in that. And again, the key aspect is not the indicators or the facts or the numbers or the details. It's the fact that they all recognize it. Just like with all the young people who've recognized that I can't buy a house in this country, basically, no matter what I do, unless I'm very successful, which by definition, most of us won't be relatively, then I can't buy a house. So it's that they've recognized it, and the tourists have also recognized it. I think those are important details. There's one more. This will be really quick because it's not, I don't have like a passionate ramble about it. It's just, I saw Last True Gale put this up somewhere, and I just thought it was interesting. I'll skip through this, right? So growing government fears that new builds are set to plummet. So the whole idea was that we're bringing in hundreds of thousands of people, and we're just pulling the lawnmower string here. We're trying to get it going. But once we do, we'll start building like crazy. It'll be like, Dubai or whatever. And the development will be amazing. It'll be like a development economy. Loads of people in. High-speed rail can only be justified if we have 10 gazillion people. But with the 10 gazillion people will come the high-speed rail and lots of houses and all that. Prices will level out. So-called, as if that was ever going to happen or they had any interest in that. But now we see, actually, the bills are plummeting. The people are still coming in. The young people have given up on even trying to get a house. The government aren't even building, or no one is building enough for all these people who are going to be going on social housing, plus all the foreigners, the asylum seekers, whatever. The houses aren't being built. The numbers are stacking up still, worse than there was a housing crisis, bear in mind, like 8 years ago, right? The people were talking about housing crisis. Now we're like deep layers in. and the numbers are coming in. They're not building the houses, and they've appointed a government czar. So the housing minister isn't good enough anymore. Now they need a czar on like 400 grand a year. And even with the czar, it's not happening. And the reason it's not happening is because they can't, well, there are many reasons, but one of them is that the infrastructure isn't there. The water systems, the energy systems, all the fundamentals that, like, if you're a developer building an estate, you need to be able to hook it up effectively. And to hook it up, this source point, the water sources, whatever it happens to be, they need to be sufficient for it. You know, they can't just like build lots of houses and then there's just like dry taps all over the place. Obviously that can't happen. So there are basically like hard stops. And of course, the state can't work its way around building the houses. The migration thing is off the wall. They're doing that. Like, it's so rotten and so at the behest of corrupt vested interests who just want to make bucks out of pillaging people for their life force, basically, through like rent extraction. It's so under the thumb of that like the actual state that is meant to be on top of water and this and that and the other, which is really their job. Your job isn't to bring in 200,000 people and censor me, right? Or have some NGO follow us around. That's not your job. Your job actually is to have sufficient water and sufficient everything, and to make sure that the pipes, if they're very old, that they're refitted. And that's what a modern state does. And it builds new railways and this, that, and the other. The infrastructure, that is like primary state activity. But that's completely hollowed out. It's like there's almost no one at the wheel, really. There's probably some low-level people working with Irish Water and whatever that they're trying, but the actual state, the Simon Harris, much like he says to Ben Scallon, I don't know, you'd have to ask someone else, I don't know. It would be the same for, well, what about the water situation here, here, and here? What's going on? Like, you know, what about this, that, and the other? The attitude is like, I don't know, this is not my job. Like, who's doing it? Like, you know, no one. But they have plenty of resources to manage this asylum system, so-called, and have Cathal Malone and all these other people. So the state is active and busy. It's just busy destroying the country, and actually doing anything productive or useful, or what a state should be doing, is just kind of no one at the wheel. It's sort of running on inertia a little bit. And that's what's happening. And it's coming back to bite now, because the houses it's not possible to build the houses. And if you can't work your way around the migration and the housing itself and all that, well, if you can't do that, then how are you going to start doing fundamental things like overhauling water and this and that? And like, you know, the way the Netherlands like built polders, built new land. And you know, I think in Hong Kong, they needed a new airport and the mountains were in the way. So they built a fake island, basically. And it was a huge like engineering project, state project. You know, all this kind of stuff. You know, you name it, Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, this type of stuff, like that sort of real, like a state rolling up its sleeves and dealing with fundamental problems properly, with real statesmen and statecraft and all that. That's not there. Like there's no one really there for that. And so that's why I think of it as a singularity. We're just kind of reaching a point where it's like, well, what are we doing? Like even these 60% of people who want to go into social houses because they can't afford normal houses. Well, like there's not enough social houses as is. So how are we building them if we don't have water? And if you need to overhaul the water system and do this and that, who's going to do that? More migrants? Is that we need more migrants? So the same argument you previously might have made with housing, which the former minister for housing, his name was, it escapes me, some C word, right? Owen Murphy, I think was his name. He once said in an interview that we need more migrants. He said it in a long-winded way, but effectively what he said is we need more migrants. The premise of the story was that migrants who were here, construction workers, are finding it hard to find accommodation, right? That was it was so funny. The premise of the article was that, and he was asked about it. And he said, what we need to do is we need to build more houses for the migrants who are coming here to build houses. And then I worked it out. And I was like, so he's effectively saying we need more migrants to build houses for the migrants who are building houses for migrants. That's the like snake eating itself type of situation we're in, right? So like how many, like we need How many layers of that can you possibly add on? So then you go, I assume this would be the only answer the state has, because we don't have the capacity. We're like, it's too heated up. The labor market is too dead in the water, or like, it's too tight. There's people out of work long term, blah, blah, blah. There's just not enough people to go around, let's say, for the singularity we've gotten ourselves into. So now it would be, we need to bring in more migrants to build the water infrastructure in order to build houses for the migrants who we're bringing in to build houses for migrants. Because ultimately, that's who we're building houses for. Ireland's population is, like, the top 20 fastest growing populations in the world are like Ghana, the Congo, places where people have 8 kids or whatever. And then you see Ireland shoehorned in there as well. So I broke it down. It's that we were like next to Zambia, I think, and I looked up their fertility rate. It's like 4.5 kids. So our country is growing at the rate of a country that's having 4.5 kids per woman, but actually we're having like 1.5. So there's an entire like 2 other European countries combined TFRs added onto ours. That's migration. So the whole like society, the whole economy and everything is completely revolving around migration, right? And it's just totally eating itself. Because, when I say migrants to build the water infrastructure for the migrants who are building houses for migrants, at the end of the day, it's just like lots of migrants coming in, starting the demand chain, leading to more and more requirements for workers and all this kind of stuff. There was a South Dublin posh TD, I forget her name, Carol, I forget her name, don't care. She tried to make the argument on the radio that there's a shortage of panel beaters, and so that's why we need migration. And I remember hearing that one and thinking, this is just mental, right? At what point, like, what society do you have at that point where everyone just has to be a foreigner to do anything? Something as arcane, as sort of obscure as panel beating. So now we need to do this to our country for the sake of panel. We can't just train up some panel beaters, have a labor market in accordance with the demand population in a relatively closed system that just kind of finds its balance, like any country and society throughout history has always done. Just kind of let the market kind of figure it out within a coherent context. No, it has to be a Ponzi scheme. And of course, Ponzi schemes work wonderfully. So yeah, I'll just find the quote and then I'll wrap it up. There's just, and then the guy who's meant to be figuring it out, but these civil servants, speaking anonymously, said that, yeah, he's like nowhere to be found. He's not doing anything. He's gone into hiding, and he's being paid 430 grand a year as a czar, beyond the housing minister who was like elected to do that or appointed. So now it's just more fat cats stacking up money. The Ponzi scheme is like spiraling out of control. And as you see, tourism is in free fall. Young people know they can't ever get a house. Migrants with like 10 rape convictions are coming in and naturally raping someone else when they get here, and no vetting on the way in. And the Taoiseach is like, I don't know. You have NGO people coming on bullshitting. But anyway, so here's the quote, just speaking to the infrastructure thing. Let me find it. But I could read a lot of this, but I won't, it'd get boring. So where's the quote? It's just, don't tell me that's it. Bear with me. There's a good quote here. Damn, where is it? It's kind of dead air here, isn't it? Yeah. So this was the unease was echoed by a minister who told Extra.ie, this is the quote, all of the fundamentals are wrong and they are not changing. Everything, investment, water accessibility, infrastructure, no SB connections, no gas, no financing, planning commencements. Each fundamental is trending downwards. So it's all basically going down the shitter, pardon my language, All of it. None of it works. It's a complete basket case. It's a complete nightmare, and there seems to be no way of solving it. And if I were to go to them and say, lads, why don't you just let some pressure out of the tires, right? Like this whole thing of more migrants for more migrants for more migrants, panel beaters, etc. Like, how about we just stop bringing in lots of migrants? And if you need to bring in some, I mean, the common sense is off the wall. You could just say, hey, bring it, like, oh, but we have to have them here. Okay, have them here, but don't have all those ones that you don't have to have. Like, basically have a policy of being as sparse as you can. And then when they say, yes, but we need Intel workers here, high-end workers for Intel, or else they'll put out, okay, give them the high-end workers, give them a red carpet, right? Champagne limo from the airport. Do that. But don't put 400 people in Cahersiveen in a hotel. Maybe, you know, like where you could start trimming the fat is all around us, right? The baristas, they can go. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out coffee. All this, like, tons of them can go. The bulk of it would be in the bullshit, really, right? The specialists, some of the doctors, some of whatever. Obviously, they can stay. We need them, right? My feeling would be over time you would start phasing it out. You would just basically do carrot stick, training, remodeling. Basically, we model our economy at our society and state into this situation. We'll sort of model our way back out of it gradually over time. But starting with low-hanging fruit can begin right now, easily. Like, you could just start cutting all over the place. And then when you get into the more difficult territory and stuff, you know, you could start phasing things, training people up, doing this, that, and the other. Like, all you would have to have is the will. And in terms of just cutting the population, you could find how many state-dependent non-citizens, besides asylum seekers, just state-dependent non-citizens, you would, under any international rule or whatever, you'd be fully within your right to go out, right? And if they say, I'm not leaving, you go, well, I'm cutting all state and bank access, basically. So you just can't operate in this society anymore. And if you still refuse, you're going basically in the dungeons, so to speak. Just basically get out. This stuff about, well, how do you enforce the deportations? What about NGOs? What about the cost of flights? What about putting 2 guards with them on a flight back to Tajikistan or whatever? No, just change the incentives and disincentives. Cut off the access, make it sort of unpleasant, and they'll just go. Like, they'll just go to England, they'll go to France, they'll go back to where they came from, whatever. They'll just go. That can easily be done. Same way, if I'm in China and they say, I need to be deported, are they going to escort me and pay for my everything and give me NGOs and escort me on a flight back and go through this complicated 200,000 euro appeals process? No, they'll just be like, look, you can't get on a train. You have a bank. You definitely can't get the dole. Your free house that somehow you had is gone. And all of the rest of it, you just go, you know. It could easily be done. If they wanted to start unwinding this thing, they could, if the political will were there. But of course, the political ecosystem is as toxic as the rest of it, and so that's the problem. That's you know, that's a story for another day, I suppose. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. You know, happy days. Couple of super chats and stuff there. So we have Ed the Statesman, good man, a good fella. 20, thank you very much, says, when they first started pushing the term gender-based violence, Harris was quick to parrot it. To see him slither away from Ben, highlighting a real-world gender-based violence example, shows his Weasley character perfectly. And that, at the end of the day, that's kind of it. Like, you know, when you have to come back to the basics with the Simon Harris thing. I'm not even into the whole thing of Leo the Leak, Simon the whatever. It's like, I know they're just faces and puppets and whatever, right? Bullshitters, and that's their job. They're not some sort of political. They don't really have political agency, or, you know, you're not talking to Lee Kuan Yew, you're not talking to Ataturk or whoever else. You're talking to just some actor, effectively. But insofar as they represent something or whatever, they're a figure for something. It's like, you know, this girl was raped. You know what I mean? Let's just come, like, it's all the political jargon that I'm throwing out and the details and the nuance of it. But, like, a girl was raped and she shouldn't have been. It sounds kind of like a bad soundbite. No one should be raped, obviously, right? But what I mean is, you know, this person under the government's own premise, under any common sense premise, this person shouldn't have been in the country. The government themselves were saying all along that, well, no, we're not letting like convicted rapists and stuff into the country. Like they admitted themselves that, yeah, that premise should be active. Like there shouldn't be one here. So he shouldn't be here. And if he wasn't here, that girl wouldn't have been raped, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And he was here and she was, and that's something she has, her and her family have to live with now. And there's many other cases. Look at Ashling Murphy and all the others. It's like it is mad. It's like, okay, so when it's convenient to you, like basically if you're not being paid to advocate for it or whatever, which is his situation, he's paid to like look the other way and lie. But it's like, you know, okay, Simon Harris, forget about the fact that I'm me and you're you and you're in your position and I'm a political dissident or something like that. Let's just strip all that away. Like you're being asked a question here about a girl who was raped, and the person who did it should not have been here, and it's the state's job to enforce that, and you're being asked for a second time about it, and you're sort of saying, well, I'm not familiar with the details still. It's like, it's just mad. Like you don't care. Like does that not? Because if I was the state's person and someone came to me with that, I wouldn't be like, you don't have to lose sleep because of individual cases as a state's person, but for stuff that's happened, you know, you couldn't operate like that. But certainly as a professional, you'd be going the following morning or that evening, that night, you'd be calling all your people around you and going, if you had authority and if you weren't a puppet, if you were an actual states person, and everything that comes with that, you'd call in all the technocrats, call in everyone and go, what the fuck is going on here? There's a girl raped. The guy has multiple convictions. He came in here scot-free. What the fuck is going on here? And like right this moment, I want it all stopped. And I want the people responsible brought up on it. Like, what's going on? Like, I mean, I just, you know, that's what a genuine person would just say. Let's just stop that anyway, immediately, right? And anything related, how did we get to this point? How did this happen? I wasn't aware. And you would look into NGOs and the whole asylum system and all that. You go, this is ending. We're not doing this anymore. This is nuts, right? We need to know who's here. We need the place to be safe, la, la, la. But if you applied that logic to all the rest of it, none of this stuff would be happening. Like if they, you know, but I agree, like the smarmy, like I care and I care about trans community and all this kind of stuff is just so, it's like, okay, so you care about the feelings of like some fake community or whatever, and you're acting like you're the sweetest little angel in the world and feelings are so important. But when a girl gets raped, and again, it's a crass thing to say, oh, well, she shouldn't have been, or you know what I'm saying? Like the person shouldn't have been in the country. It shouldn't have happened at all. This, like the state is responsible effectively, secondarily to the perpetrator, obviously. You know, you just don't care about that. Like it's just not expedient. Yeah, the whole taking lectures from these people is out the door. Like, anyway, sorry for the long answer. I mean, you just made the point. I basically just waffled about it. But thanks. So 5 from Armchair Limerick Nationals. Thank you, Super Sicker. And James Bond 20 says, thank you, says, start up your own NCP, National Carers Party. The army of the downtrodden, discarded and disabled is rising up against Larry Fink, Bill Gates, BlackRock, and Susan Michie. I don't know who Susan Michie is. The army of the disabled. I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't know if the army of the disabled would get very far, but anyway, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. Anyway, lads, all the chat, that support is great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it genuinely. Just makes these streams a bit more tenable, you know, that kind of way. It's all, you know yourself. Or yeah, whatever. I don't want to get silly. So anyway, what I mean to say is everybody else in the chat in general, just thank you for joining me. Always nice to have the activity. and the company in a way, you know. So I will leave it there. I'll be back before long. Take it easy. Ihawa.